some tales we'll pretend and play, so come in the polka dot way.
Once upon a time. Once upon a time. Hi. I'm writing my very own fairy tale. Well, I'm trying to write a fairy tale. Only I haven't gotten very far yet. I've got it.
Robert,
Oh, shh.
what's Robert doing? Oh, he's writing a fairy tale.
Listen, Carrie, how's this? Once upon a time, in a land far, far away.
Yes?
That's as far as I've got.
Oh, well, I like the first line. Didn't you? It sounded just like a fairy tale.
I know, but then I can't think of anything else. I even made this poster about fairy tales to give me some ideas, but so far it hasn't worked.
Look at all these different characters. Do you recognize any of them from the fairy tales that you've been told? There's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf.
And there's Aladdin and his magic lamp, and Jack and the beanstalk and the giant.
That giant looks very mean. Who's that?
Cinderella, and that's her fairy godmother. And this is Sleeping Beauty and her handsome prince.
I love the story of Sleeping Beauty.
So do I. All these fairy tales have such good stories, and I can't think of a story for my fairy tale.
Well, maybe you're trying too hard. Why don't we start at the beginning and try to think of all the things that fairy tales have in common?
What does a fairy tale need? What tales do children like to read?
A story filled with magic, a friend we must defend. When everything seems tragic, good wins in the end.
Why does a fairy tale succeed? Tell me, what does a fairy tale need?
I know. A story needs a heroine like Red Riding Hood, Snow White or Cinderella, who try to be so good, but always seem to end up in a frightful mess. With a noble heroine, your story's a success.
Okay, a fairy story often has a heroine. She's the person the story is about. But what else does the story need? I've got it. A villain. A story needs a villain, a wicked witch or two, to cause a lot of trouble and find evil things to do, like baking poison apples for a deadly treat. Without a nasty villain, your story's incomplete.
So now we know that a story needs a heroine and a nasty villain. Now, what else does it need? I know, a hero. A story needs a hero, a handsome prince to kiss, who fights for truth and justice, all evil to dismiss.
And protect all others and keep them safe from harm. With a noble hero, your story's got some charm. Oh, what does a fairy tale need? What tales do children like to read? A story filled with magic, a friend we must defend. When everything seems tragic, good wins in the end. Oh, why does a fairy tale succeed? Tell me, what does a fairy tale? What does a fairy tale? What does a fairy tale need? That's really great. I think I can write my fairy tale now. I even thought of something else a story needs that we didn't even sing about.
Well, what's that?
A place to happen. Some stories take place in the woods, like Little Red Riding Hood and Snow White. Aladdin's story takes place in a cave. And do you know what? My story is going to take place in a castle.
That's a great idea. There are lots of castles in fairy tales. You know, most fairy tales take place a long time ago, before there were any cars or televisions or airplanes. There were lots of kings and queens, and people traveled in horse-drawn coaches, and they lived in beautiful castles. Today, most people live in houses or apartments, and Hardly anybody lives in a castle. But you can still visit a castle. If you look through the polka dot door, that's what you'll see. People visiting all sorts of castles. Let's look. Even though castles were built a long time ago, many are still standing today. You can visit them if you travel to Europe and Great Britain. Castles were built with thick walls and high towers to protect the people who lived there and keep others out. Today, they're open to everyone. Because castles had to be strong, they were built of stone. This man is working on some repairs for a castle wall. A city has grown around this castle. Its grounds are used for official ceremonies and parades. Above the town, statues decorate the castle walls. This castle is in the country. It was built on a hill so the people inside could see anyone approaching from miles away. The castle walls still look pretty sturdy, don't they? But they are very old. Look, this tower is starting to crumble. It's nighttime. Statues guard the castle walls outside. Inside, people are setting the table for a fancy dinner party. Some castles put on shows for tourists. People dress up like they did long ago and serve the sort of food knights and ladies used to eat. They sing old songs and even have pretend sword fights by the castle walls. No one gets hurt though. This drawing of a castle was done long ago when people lived there. And this is what it looks like today. Every castle you visit has something different to see. Wild deer in a park, an old clock, colorful flags, and always those thick stone walls and high towers. Do you think you'd like to live in a castle? I'm being a palace guard, marching along the castle wall. Why don't you be one too? Ready? Quick march! Guards, halt! Good. Now let's pretend to be a royal king or queen. Now, kings and queens don't march around the way the palace guards did. They move slowly with dignity and grace. Good. Now let's pretend to climb all the way to the top of a tall tower. Listen to the music, and it will tell you how fast to climb. And don't forget to hold on to the handrail. Whew. I'm tired after all that climbing. Are you? So let's sit down. and enjoy the view from the top of the tower.
There we go, Dumpty. Now our castle is complete.
Robert, I thought you were writing a fairy tale.
Well, I am. The toys are helping me. They're going to tell me what it's like to live in a castle. Then I can write about it.
That's a great idea. So, Marigold, do you like living in a castle? Oh, Marigold says it's very drafty.
What's that, Humpty and Dumpty? They say there are too many stairs to climb. I thought it would be fun to live in a castle.
Pardon, Bear? Bear says he'd rather live in a house. Listen, there's the storytime clock. This is your chance, Robert. You can tell us the fairy tale you've been writing.
You think I should? Maybe no one will want to hear my story.
Of course they will. We don't want to hear our story, don't we? You see, it's a terrific idea. I'll go and tell the time while you get ready.
I'm a little nervous, toys. I've never told a story I've made up before. Do you have any advice? What's that, Marigold? Marigold says I must remember to start my story with once upon a time.
Storytime Mouse! Storytime Mouse, where are you? Storytime Mouse isn't here. Now what's this? Beware of the dragon. Dragon? I thought you only found dragons in stories. I hope this isn't a big, fierce, fiery dragon. Do you think we should have a peek? Okay. It's the Storytime Mouse. I wonder why she's pretending to be a dragon. Oh, look. What's this? Storytime Mouse has written us a poem. You'll often find a dragon when you read a fairy tale, who frightens everybody when it wags a giant tail. So I am just pretending that I'm not a mouse at all, but a terrifying dragon who's very, very tall. Oh, I see now. I think we could make the Storytime dragon very happy if we all set the time together. The long minute hand has moved all the way around the clock and is pointing straight up to the 12. So it's something o'clock. The short hour hand is pointing to the 2. So story time today is 2 o'clock.
Some fairy tales are about dragons, and some fairy tales are about witches or big bad wolves. But my fairy tale is about a little fairy whose name was Fleur. The name of the story is Fairy Tale Fairy. The pictures were drawn by Sandra Berkowitz, and the story begins once upon a time. Once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived a good fairy whose name was Fleur. Fleur was a very young fairy, and she lived in the castle of good King Storybook. Now, King Storybook was a fair and wise ruler, and he made sure that all the people who lived in his land were very, very happy. Everyone was happy. Everyone, that is, except Fleur. She wasn't happy at all because she had absolutely nothing to do. You see, good fairies are given magical powers to help people who are in trouble, or who are unhappy because someone is being mean to them. So every day Fleur would pick up her magic wand and fly through the castle looking for someone to help. But everyone was so happy already that no one ever needed a good fairy to look after them. What good is being a good fairy if there's no one to help, complained Fleur sadly. I might as well not be a fairy at all. Poor Fleur. After a hard day of not doing anything, she would go and play with the king's pet dragon. His name was Dragalot, and he was a very friendly dragon, and only breathed fiery flames when the king wanted to start a fire in the royal fireplace. Fleur and Dragalot were the best of friends, and Fleur loved to sit between Dragalot's giant ears as he wandered all over the castle. Now, one day, Fleur and Dragalot climbed all the way up to the top of the castle's tower. They had never climbed to the top before, and were both very surprised to find a big, heavy wooden door with a sign that said, Royal Library. Dragalot couldn't read, so he wasn't very interested. But Fleur was delighted, and flew right up to the shelf where all the fairy tales were kept. "Look at all these stories," she cried. "There's Cinderella, and Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty, and so many others. I'll bet they all need a good fairy to look after them." And with a cry of delight, she waved her tiny wand and cast a magic spell. And before he could say once upon a time, Fleur found herself inside the story of Snow White. Fleur arrived just in time, for she could see that the wicked queen was all dressed up like an old peddler woman and was now giving Snow White a poisoned apple to eat. "Stop!" she cried, and waved her magic wand and turned the poisoned apple into a harmless banana. The wicked queen was furious. "You silly fairy," she snarled. "Are you trying to ruin a good story? If Snow White doesn't eat the apple, then she won't fall asleep. And if she doesn't fall asleep, then the prince won't come to kiss her and wake her up. And they won't live happily ever after, and it'll be all your fault." "Oh dear," said Fleur. "I want Snow White to live happily ever after, so I'd better try another story." And before he could say once upon a time, Fleur waved her wand and flew into the story of Cinderella. This time she arrived just as the clock struck 12. She saw Cinderella run out of the palace and change back into a poor little working girl dressed in rags. "Don't worry," Fleur said. "I'll change her rags back into a beautiful ball gown and the pumpkin back into a magnificent coach." But before Fleur could wave her wand and cast a magic spell, Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared. She was much kinder than the evil queen in Snow White. "I know you are only trying to help," she told Fleur. "But if Cinderella doesn't stay in her rags, then the prince won't find the glass slipper. And without the glass slipper, he won't search the kingdom to find Cinderella and marry her, and they won't live happily ever after." "Oh, we can't have that," agreed Fleur. "Maybe I should try another fairy tale." Every fairy tale had as much magic as they needed, and every time Fleur tried to help, she nearly spoiled the story. "This won't go," But Dragalot wasn't listening. The dust in the old room was tickling his nose, and although he tried not to, Dragalot suddenly sneezed a great big sneeze. And before he could say Gesundheit, Dragalot's sneeze had accidentally set fire to the royal library. With so many books around, the fire soon became a raging inferno, and the flames began reaching upwards towards the shelf with all the fairy tales on it. Dragalot ran down the stairs to get help, but Fleur knew that by the time help came, it would be too late. All the books would be destroyed. "Fire! Fire! Fire!" The wicked queen and the fairy godmother and lots of other fairy tale characters heard Fleur shouting and popped out onto the shelf to see what the problem was. "Oh no," cried the genie of the lamp. "If the fire reaches our books, then all our stories will be gone forever." "We can all join together and use our magic to put the fire out," suggested Fleur. "No, we can't," replied Cinderella's fairy godmother. "Our magic powers only work inside our books." "Only you can save us," she told Fleur. "Only you can save all the fairy tales." "Oh, I'll try," volunteered Fleur, although she had never tried such a difficult magic spell before. She closed her eyes and waved her tiny wand and then pointed it up at the ceiling. Suddenly, a hole appeared in the roof. It grew larger and larger until there was no roof at all. Fleur waved her wand again, and dark clouds began to form in the sky above the castle. The thunder roared and the lightning crackled, and soon rain poured down through the magic hole and put the fire out. "Hooray!" shouted all the fairy tale characters. "Fleur saved us." "You are a very brave and good fairy," said Cinderella's fairy godmother. "And because of you, all the fairy tales will last forever. From this day on, you will be known as Fleur, the fairy tale fairy." Fleur was so happy because she had finally been able to put her magic powers to good use, and she knew that her magic had helped all the fairy tales to live happily ever after. And that's the end of the story. Wouldn't it be fun to have a dragon as a friend like Fleur did? Why don't we all pretend to be Dragalot, roaming through the castle halls? Oh, be careful not to sneeze. And now, let's be Cinderella dancing at the ball. And now let's be Fleur and save everyone by waving our magic wand to make it rain. I think we should all sit down now between Dragalot's big ears and fall asleep.
Robert,
Hmm?
that was a great story. It was exciting and it had magic and everything. And I am really glad that the fairy tale fairy saved all the fairy tales.
Yes.
Me too. If there weren't any fairy tales, I'd miss all my favorite stories.
And we wouldn't be able to sing our song of the week. It's all about fairy tales. Help us sing it and do the actions. Where does a boy climb up a magic beanstalk?
Where do dragons roar and wag their angry tails?
Where does a mirror listen to a queen talk?
In fairy tales. Where does a wooden nose go along from flying?
Where do fairies sing and sweet as nightingales?
Where does a magic carpet take you flying? In fairy tales. Fairy tales begin with once upon a time in a land that's far away. Tales, fairy tales filled with fantasy, and let's read one today. Where does a girl spend every morning sleeping?
Where do witches cast a spell that cannot fail?
Where does a pretty princess end up sleeping? In fairy tales.
Where does Goldilocks take breakfast from a bear?
Where do heroes end up in the palace jail?
Where does a prince climb up Rapunzel's hair?
In fairy tales.
Fairy tales.
Fairy tales begin with once upon a time in a land that's far away. Tales, fairy tales filled with fantasy, and let's read one today.
Robert, now that you've written such a wonderful fairy tale, what are you going to do with it?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is put my story on the bookshelf with all the other fairy tales. That way, everyone will know where it is.
I wonder if I could write a fairy tale. Let's see. Once upon a time, there lived a young girl who was just the same as everybody else, except for one thing. Every time she would go out for a walk, she would hear a strange voice. And the voice would say, "Pokeroo! Pokeroo." Pokeroo? No, that's not what the voice would say. Wait a minute. Did I just hear Pokeroo? Pokeroo! I did. It's the Pokeroo. I wonder what he's up to. Pokeroo. Sorry, Pokeroo. I didn't mean to surprise you. I just wanted to see what you were reading. Pokeroo. Pokeroo fairy tale. Is this a fairy tale about you, Pokeroo? 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 You want me to read the story and you'll act out the parts, is that it? Pokeroo? All right. Once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived the beautiful Princess Pokeroo. Princess Polkaroo was kind and good, and she loved to smell the pretty flowers. But Princess Polkaroo was a very unhappy princess. Because when she was very little, she had been kidnapped and taken to an island where she had no one to play with. The person who kidnapped her was none other than that Polka Beast. One day, a handsome prince was passing by. It was none other than Prince Polkaroo, the princess's long-lost brother. When he heard the princess crying, he knew it was his sister. And he was so mad that he challenged the wicked Polka Beast to a duel. The Polka Beast, although he acted mean, was really quite a coward. When he saw the noble Prince Polkaroo on his island, he ran away. Princess Polkaroo was saved. They went back to the palace and lived happily ever after. That was a wonderful fairy tale, Polkaroo. Polkaroo? Where are you, Polkaroo? He's gone. And he left his cloak.
Who left his cloak?
The Polkaroo.
The Polkaroo, was he here?
Yes. And look, he wrote a fairy tale too.
I missed him again. Well, at least I'll be able to read his book.
Yes, but maybe some other time, because it's almost time for us to go. Bye-bye. Au revoir.
A bientôt. See you soon. Well, what was the Polkaroo up to today?
He was acting out his fairy tale. The polka dot door. See you soon at the polka dot door for songs and stories and so much more. Through the polka dot door.